Hello, everyone. We're here today. We're here now to talk about the dimensionality of what it means to be spiritually healthy. But before we talk about that, we just want to mention our sponsor, Young You Organics, that has this very pleasant white sage smudge spray that's crafted by an Amazonian shaman that purifies and revitalizes your space. And I just sprayed some. It's quite pleasant. I highly recommend it. I definitely give it a 10 out of 10. If you haven't seen our podcast before, then I can just tell you that it definitely enhances my dreams. And I just really enjoy spraying it and bringing in a pleasant scent to the space that I'm in.
Yeah, I use it as kind of like a pause.
A
Like,
pause.
yeah, like, you know, a pause to move into something new, to change directions. I also use it as like part of rituals, but it just brings, like you said, a pleasant sensation. It's kind of like light and misty. But yeah, it just helps me to, remember to connect to myself, take a minute.
It's a good pause to just stop what you're doing, start doing something else, and like enter that real quick trance of adding something pleasant into your space and doing something pleasant for yourself and continue about what you're doing.
Yeah.
I agree.
Richard Rudd talks a lot about the importance of pausing. You get to pay attention more to the moment rather than just being carried away with whatever it is you got going on.
Well, with that, I'm gonna, take a pause, spray a little bit more.
So, we're going to be talking about the dimensions of our health today because we think that spiritual health has to do with everything.
All encompassing. All
Yeah.
encompassing.
As far as my understanding of spirit goes, it's what underlies everything and gives everything its in life its movement. I actually saw a YouTube video, I think it was, this person saying like, "Can you eat sugar and be a spiritual person?" It's like, what the? Sorry if you've ever asked that question, but I think it's kind of silly. Like, of
Yeah.
course you can be. Like, you could be any kind of person you want and you're spiritual.
Even the people that are saying they're not spiritual, well, that's their own spirituality. The
Yeah.
not spiritual.
Yeah, I guess it's just a different understanding of what spirit is. I feel like if
Sure.
anything, spirituality is like supposed to, or not supposed to, but has I don't know, part of the intention maybe is to help you break free of the confines of the thoughts that humans have created and the rules and a lot of the things that are just not accurate that we think about life. And there's like, can I eat sugar and still be spiritual? I mean, why would you
Yeah.
place that rule or limitation on yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting too. I heard in a conversation that I was having, someone said that you cannot be conscious and drink alcohol, and you cannot be, in a conscious state while consuming alcohol. And I was like, I don't buy that. Like you could
Mm,
totally be conscious of the alcohol going into your body, and then, be conscious of how it affects you when you're in that state. And like I understand like where it was coming from, like if you abuse it, but like just to say like generalize, like if you have a glass of wine, once a month and you can't be spiritual and you are not working unconscious, I just Nah, not buying that. I think that's actually kind of like an all or nothing type of mentality, very dualistic.
Mm,
And yeah, ultimately, I mean, it just doesn't work for me.
yeah, I certainly think it could be either way, right? You could be doing it consciously, or you could not be. I mean, I think you're still conscious though.
Yeah,
One
depending, I
way or
guess,
the
until you
other.
black out.
Yeah,
But
right, until you
even
drink too
then,
much. Yeah, then I'm not sure. I mean, some people too black out like as they're awake. That happened to Louis a lot towards the end of his drinking career. He was
career.
having like he was having awake blackouts.
Mm,
I don't know. Was he conscious then?
yeah,
We'll have to
not
ask the
sure.
mysteries.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask the universe
Yeah,
on
I mean,
that.
he just had like a smaller bit of consciousness going on. Smaller
Yeah,
focus,
maybe.
right? It's just like a different focus. Isn't that all it
Yeah, it's
is?
just
Like what you're focused on, what you're paying attention to, what you're aware of. That's kind of what I always think of the definition of it, of
y-
consciousness.
yeah, same here. I think of it as states. So like the inebriated state is a state, the like sort of buzz state is a state, the sugar high state is a state, the healthy state is a state, healthy consciousness, health consciousness. And actually, I also wanted to mention too that um, we talked about this, but these are just our understandings, and we're not saying like these are the understandings, the end all be all. It's just we're here to just discuss what we've discovered so far along our journey.
Yeah, this is just how I frame it right now, how when I think about health. But anyone's free to frame it in any way they choose to. It's just my understanding at the moment. Yeah, so I
We're all
think,
just
oh, go on.
pardon. Just gonna compliment what you said, and we're all just figuring it out as we go along.
Yeah, we're refiguring it out.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you about to say?
Oh, I have no idea. It's all good.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So the dimensionality of spiritual health, we are saying that the spiritual health encapsulates and is like a Venn diagram where you can't really separate out each of these aspects, the aspects of your mental state, your physical state, your emotional state, and your energetic state. And so we could just start with the first one, and that's the mental state. And what would you say, Melissa, would be your current understanding and definitions of what the mental state is?
Well, I think the mental state has to do with the brain and the mind. And the way you use it. So the thoughts that you think, how you solve problems, how you're orienting, all those things that the brain does, like categorize and classify and put things into hierarchies and judge things. Like, what is your state with your brain? And then I suppose the imagination gets put in there, but I also think of the imagination as not, I mean, it's a function of the brain, but I also think it's a function that's kind of like a bridge with the rest of the body as well. I mean, so is the brain, right? Like what I mean the mind. So like what you're thinking, you're gonna it's gonna create different states in your body, different feeling states. There are some schools of thought that say, all of our physical health problems, like things we could concretely say you have like a cancer or something, I just saw on Instagram some girl was saying even like mold toxicity, it's not a problem with the actual mold. It's like a problem like in your body. Like not that the mold is causing it, but it's like a problem that like these dimensions that you have like within these dimensions really.
I've come to very similar understandings too. And I mean, we study with some of the same people. But exactly, it's the mental state is, from my understanding, how the brain is functioning, and then that functioning is what we call the mind. And we have both left brain and right brain. And I mean, it's broken down into more too, the front of the brain, the back of the brain. But we have what most people consider to be the left brain to be the rational aspect of our brain, and the right brain to be the imagination. And I actually, have very similar thoughts to what you were saying about how the imagination goes just beyond just the right hemisphere of the brain. I mean, often you hear the imagination as like the third eye. And in the shamanic definition of the imagination is a visionary gateway that is free of any fantasy or fabrication, that sits in a blank space, and that is a shamanic tool to be able to perceive different realms, worlds, and dimensions. And so I think that it could go beyond just being a hemisphere of the brain.
Yeah, I mean I suppose the other mind can too. I've definitely read things where people think that almost like how there's a collective consciousness, there's a collective mind as well. But I've also read stuff where the brain's very linear and it doesn't pick up on, not like the heart would pick up on that like kind of like intuition, right? Like I don't know if it's that the brain is just so analytical
Mm,
or just the way it's programmed. Maybe if it wasn't programmed in that way, it would be more possible, right? Like maybe if both parts of the brain were more in sync and we weren't even describing it as this part of the brain does that thing and that part of the brain does that thing.
yeah, and just seeing it as one brain instead of like, you know, having an education system that atrophies the imagination.
Yeah, right. If both kind of mechanisms were more in balance, then like we're saying here that the imagination's kind of a gateway. Maybe the analytical brain could also be somewhat of a gateway if it were just more in balance. I don't know if that actually makes sense, but
No, it totally does. The balancing of the brain and the heart being just this sphere. It's not even a sphere, but totally encapsulates the brain and the mind, and being a total harmonization for having a brain.
I suppose maybe the brain isn't a sensing organ, which is something that it has is a difference with the heart. I mean, obviously there's a lot of differences between the brain and the heart. But I wonder that might be more so why it doesn't function in that way that the heart can, where it can kind of like intuit and connect more. I
That's
think it
very
collects
interesting.
sensory data, but I don't think it I don't know. I don't think it senses though.
I'm not entirely sure either, but um, from what I understand about what you're saying is that the brain is an interpretation organ.
Yeah.
So it's interpreting what's going on outside of the body and what's going on inside of the body. And it's interpreting all of just this raw data that we have through all of our senses. Like the fact that your eyes are only seeing your brain and what you see through your eyes is just an image that your brain is creating through the light coming through your eyes, and it's not actually the thing that you're looking at itself.
Yes, that's my understanding as well. And I think in the way that like your heart could sense something that's not a direct like directly taken from your senses, right? Where the brain only takes in, I mean, what's taken from like those sensory neurons.
We have a very, very complex body.
Yeah, I mean, thank God.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and this exploration, you look at the body and, wow, it's a divine miracle to just have a body, and the body itself is a divine
Yeah.
miracle.
Yeah, that everything comes together in the way that it does, and that all of the cells divide in the way that they're supposed to, and all the organs form and all the systems form. It really is a miracle. I remember thinking that when I was getting my master's degree and learning about anatomy and physiology, I was like, whoa, it's like how it happens mostly right. It's like 8 billion times.
So infinitely complex.
Yeah,
So this is about spiritual health. So, um, I was thinking that we talk about ways in which we practice mental health. So I could go first.
sure.
In ways in which I practice mental health, and balancing both the left and right hemisphere is I do imagination exercises where I'm imagining all the objects around me. And if I can't imagine all of them, then I'll pick certain ones. And um, I do different types of meditations with the imagination to imagine colors, and I also do different types of journey work to open my imagination and to free my imagination and to really journey into all kinds of what would be described as worlds, realms, or dimensions. And for the rational hemisphere of the brain, I like to read. I like to learn about things that interest me in science and things that really interest me about exercise and about just the human anatomy. And there's a practice that I know that we both did called total liberation or total awakening. That is a semantic practice where you tap the body and you really just sort of recite fundamental truths that ground the brain, ground the body, and just get the noodle to relax.
So is that what your practice is right now?
Yeah, that's been some of it. It's like a little snippet. I've been practicing more Qigong lately, and so with that, I really like that one meditation where you imagine, I think it's called the centrifuge of light, which houses the three dantian and the seven chakras. And so just using my imagination to imagine that and to really rationalize too how there could be different, color channels of the body beyond the symbology of it. But the fact that we are beings made of light, and um many would say, and I don't know for sure, but we're also beings that, since we're made of this pure white light, we're emanating these colors. And so really just imagining that, and then different types of imagination exercises that go with that. And I mean, rationality, like you gotta be able to crunch numbers, figure out budgets. And I think a big one for me is really learning how to just stop creating the fear so that my mental state can just relax. And so that when I look at the problems, that I don't have to come at it at a fearful state. Oftentimes for me, money has been like something that causes me great fear. And so I noticed with utilizing what is taught in Blue Morpho's Mystery School of Sanctuary Consciousness, of um, turning down the fear, turning off the fear, it actually really does improve both of those hemispheres of the brain working simultaneously as one brain instead of it being contorted with fear. And I'm not saying like I'm perfect and like there's still things that I know that could cause me fear, but these are just tools to be able to better ourselves, have a more peaceful existence.
Yeah, well done.
And you?
Right now I'm focusing a lot on reorienting my brain to positivity and to let go of like judgments and criticisms, expectations, mm, any kind of like separation thinking, and really focusing on when I do notice thoughts to allow myself to really really kind of feel what's going on in my body with the thoughts and pay really close attention to all the feelings and all the sensations and ask to see things differently or ask to be shown what is the actual truth of the matter and to remind myself that I get to choose my thoughts and I get to choose how. I mean, to be honest, I'm not always choosing what's going on in my brain, but I can become more conscious of what's going on there and be more active with choosing what's happening in there. So that's what I've been doing recently. I think relaxing a lot too is really important for the brain. I do meditate, which I think is also helpful to relax the brain and to be more aware of the thinking, of the thoughts. I mean, it's also really healthy for your body, the meditation.
So
And
those are
also,
the
like, my meditation is my spiritual health as well, because I do that, like, centering prayer meditation.
So those are the ways that you really live a healthy lifestyle with keeping your mentality healthy.
Yeah, that's what I've been focusing on recently.
Very nice. I like that without the judgment and without the criticism. And actually, I would like to emulate that because I think when we live in a state of judgment, it really does like just like warp and twist our brain because a lot of what happens when we judge situations, when we judge others, when we judge ourselves, is we create false conclusions in the mind and it leads to a lot of personal struggle.
Oh, definitely. I could see that happening all the time. Like I just went to we were in Target the other day and I was getting a basket and there was a girl coming at me and I was like, "Oh, do you want a basket?" And she's like, "No." And I walked away with Louis. I'm like, I could have so easily just been like, "Oh, that girl like didn't offer my help." But I mean, her hands were full. Like it would have been uncomfortable for her to take a basket. She probably wanted to put all of her stuff down in the basket and then pick it up. So it's so easy to make assumptions based on your own personal perspective when like your perspective is just this like tiny little thing that's for the most part been highly conditioned.
Yeah, I mean, even earlier today, I was making judgments but as you say, when you grow and evolve and you really participate in practices. And we're not saying like you have to like practice what we practice or you have to practice what I practice. It's really about finding what works for you. But when you create the space to be conscious of your thoughts, so then as they arise, you can just, start to release them in the moment as they're coming up. Like you said, we're so deeply conditioned. I mean, it's not easy to have a mind that's been conditioned
No.
by judgment, delusion, separation, duality, us versus them, tribalism. It creates a lot of strife.
Yeah, I think too a lot of what the mind does is habitual.
Yeah, yeah, it's the mind, you know, we have ritualized ways of thinking. And so it's just like any other ritual of when you recognize that the ritual isn't working for you anymore to just create a new one.
Yeah, I mean, easier said than done, but I think it's
Oh
like
yeah.
catching it all the time and doing something different.
Yeah, like you said, catching it. That's the real key with it. It's not like not having the judgments. Although I hope one day for me it's just like not having the judgments. I'd really like to just like be done with that thing. But until I have completely weeded it out of my psyche, it's exactly as you said, you catch it.
Yep, it's a process.
It's a process, and I think the willingness to work on it and to work on releasing the patterns that really aren't serving your highest self, well, that's healthy.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
And so we have these different types of aspects, and again, we're not saying that they're separate because we embody all of them in our physical body, and that's really, our spiritual being that we get to cruise around this earth with and check out all of Earth's spirituality, the the universe's spirituality. But another aspect of spiritual health is the physicality, which just for description's sake, we're just saying that it's the rest of the body, even though it does encapsulate the brain and the mind, the functioning of the brain, in all of it. But just for description's sake of what we're talking about as far as physicality, we're just talking about, the physical body. And, I really don't like the term meat suit. I think I think our bodies are a divine miracle. And to call it a meat suit is like maybe kind of like undermining like really what we are.
Yeah, I think we've had this conversation here before. I definitely agree with that. I don't like that term at all.
So for physicality of spiritual health, um, Melissa, what would you say that the different um, aspects of our physical well-being are?
The different
Or the
aspects.
Yeah, so or just so for physicality, we have like in physicality, how do we stay spiritually healthy with our physicality?
I mean, we're just saying that spiritual is the overarching, like everything, we're saying that everything is spiritual. So I personally don't necessarily think of it as taking care of my spiritual health when I take care of my physical body, but giving that frame to it that everything is spiritual. So taking care of your physical health is part of your spirituality. Um, yeah, like I said, I don't personally kind of like think of one as helping the other usually. But how do I take care of my physical body? I could answer that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's just trying to eat a diet that supports what my health goals are. I think it's trying to move in a way that supports my health goals and that feels good. I think it's making sure you have the bases covered to just support all of the other pursuits of life so I can pursue my spirituality. So making sure that I'm rested and that I drink water and that I think, we talked about relaxation for the mind, but I think that's really important for the body as well. I think partly too is like listening to the body. I think also because for such a long time I didn't really love my body and respect it, I think actively doing that is really helpful and something that I like to engage in. So like physically touching myself for the purpose of like literally giving myself a hug or like putting my hand on my stomach and really like letting myself feel my stomach or my heart or, even my legs.
Some good advice.
Thank you.
Allowing your body to, or allowing the feeling, balanced diet, finding activity when you need it, hydration, relaxation.
Yeah. Do you think of your physical body as supporting I mean, how would you answer that question that you asked me?
So I would answer the question that I asked you. Well, now I would say that my physical health and well-being is also my spiritual health and well-being, and that I don't separate the two out. And I can't see a separation between the two. And I never have been, I shouldn't say that. I should say that I I think it's always been that way for me, even though I might not have recognized it in my younger years. But like when I was younger and I also just really hated my body and I wanted to, have a good looking body so that I would feel better about myself on the inside. That was my spirituality then. And just tearing myself down on the inside and using that as just a dirty fuel to go and work out. And while it might have produced results that our culture would deem to be fit. Now that I look back on it, I see that was actually not healthy. And even then, that was my spirituality of it. And so for me, it's just so much more fluid and easy to see how my spiritual health is intertwined and interlinked with the mental, the physical, the emotional, the energetic, and also the people that I'm surrounded with and my interactions with them. So I do see my physical health as my own spiritual health, and that by focusing on being holistically healthy and having a strong body that does support me in what you could call, exploring your spirituality, although anymore I have been reframing that as exploring states of consciousness. And so I think that having a healthy, strong physical body totally supports you in all the other aspects. And I think to have a strong physical body, it requires you to, and I'm kind of using like these terms synonymously, like strong and health, even though you could define them as differently. But to have a strong and healthy physical body, it means that the whole thing, the whole spirit, your whole spirit has to be strong and healthy in all of these aspects. And
Hmm.
so for me, what I would really like to do for physical health and well-being is I like to exercise. I really enjoy using kettlebells. I recently got a Swiss ball and I've been learning different types of exercises on there. So I like intense activities sometimes. Now, I sometimes it's not necessary for me to do. And so that goes back to what you were saying and what I particularly learned from you is listening to the body. And so I like to give myself tests anymore to see like what type of physical activity that I'm ready for. I often heard Paul Chek talk about this, where you give yourself tests to see, he calls it, I think, red. Yeah, he zones it into different types of colors, but it's just essentially the idea around it is testing your body to see what your body is ready for that day. And if you are not ready for the intense exercises, then it's going to be a disservice to your own physical well-being then to go do them. So I look at it as a balance of intense activities and gentle activities, and all of that is based in feeling and how I feel that day and what I need to do. So sometimes my exercise routine really could look like a really intense kettlebell workout followed by a walk. And then maybe, some days it's definitely not that every day. Uh, Qigong, some days just Qigong and like gentle yoga. Those would be like the more gentler days. I really like to go on a walk as much as I comfortably can just to get outside. I think that goes back to the mental aspect of it, of just getting outside. I think it's really good for your brain and just using your rationalization to focus, more so than just on the mental narrative and stories that are going on, but to also understand like there's much more going on than just that mental story and narrative, and not to diminish the mental story and narrative at all, because that's important and has its place too. But I think it's good to understand there's much more going on. And I eat healthy foods. I try to get as the healthiest foods that I can get, although sometimes I like to have, like a little treat. And I think also understanding and not denying those aspects of life that are like the sweet treat or like the glass of wine or just like toasting to like some friends on occasion. It's all in moderation, really. You know, like I've been having like a philosophy of like not seeking it, but if it shows up. But then you gotta also think like if those things show up all the time and are showing up constantly, well, then at a certain point you gotta say no. So like I include all of that type of philosophy in how I eat, and I look at it as a percentage. So like I want to eat throughout the course of a year. I want to have like 98 to 99% of what I eat throughout that year be foods that would be considered healthy. I get plenty of sleep. I think that's really important. It's really important for recovery from intense exercises. It's just important for the whole kit and caboodle here. Hydration, like you were saying, drinking an appropriate amount of water. And something I discovered recently too that I've been sort of experimenting around with is having water 20 minutes prior to eating, not having any water while I'm eating, and then waiting an hour to drink water again, so that I'm not just washing away the enzymes. Don't know how true that is. I heard it I heard it somewhere, so I was like, oh, I'll test it out. And relaxation of just really finding the quiet time to be with myself, and breath work is how I find relaxation. Meditation is how I find relaxation. Listening to music, getting out for a walk, and just having a really balanced physical training regimen that includes all of that.
It's very detailed. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. This is like my wheelhouse. I love talking about these things. It's just like something that I've been just uh, on a path of learning for the past 20 years or so, as far as like fitness, health, well-being. I mean, I remember counting calories like when I was 13 years old and like not wanting to be like a fat little chubby kid, which I kind of was for a little bit.
Mm, how's that for you?
How was that for me? Um, well, I don't know, I really fluctuated a lot when I was a kid. I went from being like skinny to kind of chunky, and then like back to skinny to like pretty muscular. And yeah, it was just really all because, like I was told like this is what women find attractive, this is what um is healthy, this is what is fit, this is how you should be, and all of those things, which most of them, now looking back on it, it was complete bullshit, and most of it wasn't healthy, and most of it wasn't fitness, and it was pretty much the exact opposite, oddly enough.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of what we learn is just bullshit, unfortunately. I suppose everyone's doing their best, but
I suppose.
I mean, I like to orient from that position.
Yeah, I like to think that everyone is giving it the best given the information that they have.
Yeah, and what they've gone through in their life, for sure.
Yeah, it's a very compassionate way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to blame anybody. Everyone always did the best, they did the best they can with, like you said, what they had.
Yeah, and ultimately too, if you're spending your time blaming someone for the problem, that's could be time used to figure out the solution rather than blame.
Yeah, I mean, if you're blaming someone, I don't think there is a solution.
Well put.
Something I thought of while you were talking, I think that's important for the physical health too, is and I just started doing this actually. It's like paying attention to the products that I use because there's so
Yeah.
many products out there that have so many harmful chemicals in them. I
Yeah,
mean, from
yeah.
everything like soaps, dish soap, hair soap, body soap,
Yeah, that's
laundry
really
soap.
important.
I think that's a pretty important thing too. Like
I'm really glad
soap,
you brought that up.
all the kinds of soaps, makeup, toothpaste, toothbrushes, dental floss. I mean, all the products that we interface with, perfume, candles, air fresheners, those Febreze plugins. All those are harmful for us. So I think too, like developing an awareness of what those things are and how I want to limit them from my space and myself. That's been something I've been focusing on too.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that is another really important aspect of spiritual health and just total health and well-being is the products that you use, and being aware of what are the ingredients in which you are eating, even though I know you didn't mention that, but also it brings about being aware of what's in the products that you're using too. There's a really good app out there. We've discussed this before, but for the listeners, it's called Yuka, Yuka, and it's an app, and it rates all kinds of products. It even rates food products, and it'll tell you if the product has any harmful chemicals in it. And yeah, it's a really handy tool that I like to use.
Yeah, I use that too. I think even I what popped up too is like our cookware. We have to be mindful of the water
Non-stick
bottles that
pans,
you drink out of, the cutting boards. Yeah, all of it.
the cutting boards. Ooh, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, on a
Makes
plastic
sense.
cutting board.
I have a wooden one too. I got to start using the wooden one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never
I
really
think
thought
too,
about that.
even like the kind of lighting you have, I'm not like super deep into that, but I think even that's really important. I don't know a whole lot about that, but
Yeah, the subject's really deep. And I've also even heard too, like as far as wearing shoes that have plastic soles on it, that you don't get to eliminate the electrical, whatever you call it, in the body that you would if it was made out of something that would be
mm,
like leather. And
I never even thought of that.
yeah, that's what I'm like grounding yourself to the earth with bare feet, although it's not always feasible where we live, in Pennsylvania. Yeah, I mean, I could spend all of 5 minutes outside in the cold
Yeah.
weather, maybe five.
I think you could stand on tinfoil also to help release the energy, like the
Oh, I never
EMFs
heard
and
about
stuff.
that.
Yeah, you could stand on tinfoil. I mean, but tinfoil, that's like even another not so great product for us. The plastic containers that we use, that's really, they're all popping up. I think too, what's important, well, this is important for me too, is to not create a whole lot of fear around all these things are out there and in my environment, or I have to get rid of all these things like immediately, but just to be like, oh, hey, I could be aware of all these things and make changes as I need to, or make choices as I need to, without creating fear around all of the stuff that's out there and that has the potential to be harmful.
I think that's a very wise and really also important too, is like you said, not to create the fear around it, but just the awareness. Because I think if you create the fear around it, it's gonna be it's gonna be more harmful mentally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fear and worry is super stressful on the body and the spirit in general.
Yeah, your whole spirit, which I'm not differentiating between like, like some outside disembodied spirit. When I say your spirit, it's just for you listeners, I'm literally meaning your physical body, your physical spirit. Mhm. What we're calling the spiritual health, or I'm calling it anyway.
I'm just on board for the conversation. I never really thought of it that way, but I'm certainly open to it. It makes sense. So what's next?
What's next is emotional. The emotional sphere, it's been called. And I think you do a very good job of explaining this. Could you
Hmm.
explain this for the listeners?
Yeah. So I think everyone know I think the emotions are the cognitive classification that we give to the felt senses of our body. So you know a certain feeling and you say, "Oh, this is happy," or you have a certain feeling and you say, "Oh, this is sad." Or you have a certain feeling and you say that, "Oh, this is angry." So it's the sensation in the body along with the classification of what it is. And I think in terms of emotional health, yeah, that's a big topic. I feel like it's such a new a new thing to be aware of, people's emotions, or that emotions are important in general.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that might have been suppressed.
Yeah, I think so too. I think maybe in the generation from our parents, it wasn't so much of a topic. I don't know if that comes just with awareness or necessity or science, but I know that I don't think anyone was supporting my mom and her emotional health. And I don't think she knew how to support me and my emotional health. And I don't think parenting, I think the ideas of what a child was were different. than they are now. And I think again, I think that comes with a lot of our understanding of like of science.
I think in general, it seems to be pretty accurate. I would say that I've experienced something similar too with just you know, my father and mother never were taught how to be emotionally healthy and to balance out their emotions. So they couldn't really teach me those things. And yeah, perhaps it's just a generational thing. Maybe like not everyone in the generation, but you got to look at it broadly. And yeah, maybe that is something that's culture enculturated and was enculturated.
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but I forgot. I think too, you know, not dealing with your own feelings makes you a lot less able to deal with anyone else's feelings. So I wonder too if that was something that was happening to our parents. I don't know what it was like, the generation before them. Things were probably hard.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. And yeah, I mean, if you're not capable of giving something, then it's impossible to expect them to it's impossible to ask them to or expect them to be able to give us something that they're just not capable of. And there's no shame in that either. It's just like the way, if it is an enculturated thing, then it's just the way culture was flowing.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, right? Like there's a whole idea around what a man like should and shouldn't be. Same as a woman too, where like men can't be emotional and women are so emotional.
Yeah, yeah. I've had to deal with a lot of that coming back from Peru and just like crying at like things that I don't know, maybe I would have had a hard time crying about before of just like certain things, but anymore, I don't see that as like something like against my manliness. And in fact, I think that's like more supportive of really what it means for me being masculine. And I don't think like just because I'm a man, that means like all of my qualities then are going to be masculine. Like I do have some feminine qualities, even though I'm a man, and I would say like the same thing for everyone. I mean, just because you're a woman, I'm sure you have some masculine qualities for all the women out there, and for all the men out there.
Yeah, and I want to say I was just laughing at that, but I think it's a really serious topic because I think so many people were, taught that they had to be a certain way and maybe just had to conform or didn't fit that or it didn't work for them. So, not to make light of it for people that really do experience the pain kind of that incongruity.
Yeah, it's all good. Sometimes you just gotta laugh it off because like you don't really know what else to say, or I get that. And yeah, I mean, I can look from my own personal experience, and I have an inkling that this applies broadly, although I don't know specifically, but I know when, and this is even in school too, you're not really taught to how to balance your emotions. But when you're taught that only a certain few emotional states are acceptable, happiness is pretty much the only one, right?
Compliance, is that an emotion?
Yeah, well, yeah, compliance. Are you happy? Why don't you look happy? Why aren't you smiling? Fuck off. Why don't you just let me do my job? How about that one? Sorry. But see what I mean? Like I get people at my job who are like, "Oh, you're not smiling." Like, yeah, no shit. I'm fucking just trying to get by doing this job. Like, I don't have to smile at you. But
Mm.
anyway, I was going off on a tangent. Is that when you are limited to only being able to be in one emotional state and not be in any other emotional state? Well, number one, it's impossible. And it creates so much tweaking on the mind if you only think that you can be happy, or think that like you're only ever going to be happy, and to not show up in those ways, or just to even or just like just neutral. Like if you're not happy, if you're not neutral, if you show up sad, if you show up angry, if you show up jealous, if you show up in doubt, often like people will attack you for that shit. And you know, it really limits your growth, which would be your spiritual growth. It really does limit all of those things. And so I think to, be spiritually healthy, you have to have a balanced emotional state. You have to understand, like, this is life, and it's capable of producing happiness, sadness, anxiousness, fear, anxiety, doubt, all of it. And the health comes in the willingness to be able to look at that honestly and truthfully within yourself, and to work at balancing those things so that they don't stagnate.
Yeah, I think it's important to not let the emotions fester.
Absolutely. Well
So, what
put.
do you do for your emotional health, Nick?
I do different types of ceremonies. So, I particularly enjoy cannabis ceremonies, and I have um, one once a week, and I have many intentions that go along with it. But one of my intentions that I consistently have with it is balancing my emotions from the entire week. Now, I'm working on these things going into it throughout the whole week, but then that is like the certain percentage that I couldn't handle being in just a normal daily consciousness, where I take it into there, take it into the cannabis medicine, take it into the cannabis ceremony, and into a non-ordinary state, and balance out those things there. And I always really feel great once I'm done with it, and much more calm, much more relaxed, much more capable
Hmm,
after it.
that's a good idea.
Talking with people too, just like being able to vent to someone. I sometimes vent to you, and but not always being like that too. So like if I ever I'm like always venting, please say like, yo, shut the fuck up. So I don't know. But so that's what I do to balance my emotional state. How about you?
I think I just try to deal with my emotions when they come up. I think part of the mental, I was going to say training, but I don't really think of it as training, but I can't think of another word. The mental training or practices are also helpful for the emotional state because the thoughts that you have create feelings in your body. And to stay out of making any kind of story when I do feel my feelings, to really just let myself feel them and to feel them as fully as I possibly can. I think I do a lot of breath work, which is helpful with that to release some stored emotions. Moving too, I think, could be helpful depending on you're feeling kind of like down. Sometimes just even exercising is helpful to feel a little bit more perked up.
Yeah, I mean the way that um exercise um how do I want to put this? The way that exercise affects your brain, it does create, I think it does create dopamine, and you could get, a good feeling and a balanced feeling when you're done with it.
Yeah. I think too, some journaling is helpful, and I do this process that I learned from Dr. Sam, part of the coding that I could do like self coding. So I do that sometimes too if I'm not feeling right emotionally or kind of like off or out of balance. I did the TA, which is supposed to help overall release all traumas.
That does help balance emotionally. It did for me. That one's work though. You gotta like, I think that one's like a continuous type of practice. Or I've noticed like it's good when I'm doing it consistently, even though I haven't been doing it so consistently recently.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's probably always stored emotions that are have not yet been processed. And then on top of it, all the ones that maybe you're at work and it's not appropriate to cry, so you have to like shove it down sometimes. You might not want to, but it might not be the appropriate time and space to actually like let the emotion go. So sometimes even if you are practicing and actively, paying attention and being aware and having practices that you work with your emotions, I think that they could still inadvertently get a little buried sometimes.
That's a good point. That is a good point. I think you deal with those times when you might have to shove it down and put it on the back burner. Because you put it on the back burner for a little bit later on and you handle it with the practices, you can handle it with ceremony, specifically to balance all of that out.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that, a ceremony to balance my emotions.
Yeah, I like to give it just like that broad intention. So that way I could just see all the emotions all at once and then just balance the whole thing all at once.
Hmm, I like that.
So, spiritual health with the emotions, I would say to sum it up, is to balance it out. As you said, not stagnate. What else would you say?
I think just letting a lot of stuff go. I don't know if we're supposed to like have all of this like, fluctuating emotionality. I mean, it feels good to feel excited and to feel, those more upbeat emotions, but I think overall, like a balance is like staying within a certain point, like two certain points and kind of like fluctuating beyond those, right? But when you're going from here to there, I think that's not exactly balance either.
I like what you said about just like those sort of 2 points like that. You know, um, maybe being neutral to it, and maybe Buddhists would say like not being attached to the emotion, but just feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of teachers would say that. I think too, some of the emotions we have are just like the thoughts. They're just habitual. It's literally the way that your cells are working and the way that your body's working. Like it kind of becomes like a set point to feel certain ways. So you have to work to reset that.
Got to work to reset it. The next aspect that we have is energetic. And I think
Yeah.
you do a very good job of explaining this too.
Well,
So,
similar to spiritual, I think that everything is energy. So it kind of encompasses it all. I think of it maybe as the emotional health without the emotion behind it, the feeling health, right? The sensor, the what are you sensing? What are you noticing on the inside? And then I think that's related again to how you're thinking, to fear and doubt to how did you resource your body today in terms of what we talked about, the physical stuff, right? The food, the drinks, the movement. I think grounding too
Yeah,
is important for the energy. I think relaxing too. I think those are important practices for the energy.
I think so too.
And the breath work.
Grounding, relaxing, conscious breathing, breath work. We mentioned before the energetic being the feelings, but without any of the labels of the feelings.
Yeah. Well, I think the emotions, they tend to be more of like the classification of what the feeling is, like that label or that thing that the brain does,
The
which is
interpretation.
interesting. Yeah, because you actually have to teach kids that. Like you mentalize things for them to help them make sense out of what's happening. So if you have a child and maybe they're crying because not their turn in a game, wow, you must be so frustrated right now. It's so hard to wait. I get frustrated too sometimes when I have to wait my turn or when I have to wait for things. Yeah, so you actually have to mentalize for them.
That's really interesting. I've never heard it put that way before for children.
Yeah, to give them some kind of understanding or frame of what is going on inside of them.
Yeah, because I mean, it's hard for me to remember back, but I would imagine, yeah, that you're teaching them everything, even the framework.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, like, oh, of course it makes so much sense you're crying right now. You got hurt. And sometimes when you're in pain, you cry and you get sad, like when your body is messed up or cut or injured.
Does that help you too? With learning about like that psychology of the mental processing and what we're talking about.
I mean, it helps to understand that like kids have their own perspective and their own viewing on everything, and that they're entitled to also feel the way that they feel about whatever it is that they're feeling. So yeah, it's good to kind of relate to them and what's going on for them instead of relating to them from my perspective. Like, oh, this is just annoying to deal with it now. No, it makes sense. He's upset because he didn't get to do something. And I have to really see it from that perspective versus my perspective of, I just don't feel like dealing with this emotion right now. Or this is, I'm about to go work out. I don't want to sit here and comfort someone who's crying. I want to do what I want to be doing. So, in that way, yeah, it's helpful.
I think that's very emotionally mature.
Well, I feel as if you need to be emotionally mature if you are a parent and want to raise your children in a way that they're able to handle their emotions as well. But thank you. It's so funny. When I was working in my recent job as a speech therapist, so many of the parents would say, "But they can't tell me what they're feeling." I'm like, "But they are telling you just because they're not saying I'm frustrated." You could tell exactly how they're behaving, like you know what's going on with them.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, you know,
Huh.
the behavior is the communication. I don't know what made me share that little tidbit. I forget what we were talking about. Sometimes
We're
my
talking
brain just
about
blocks out like what we were just talking about.
no, it all ties in together with the energetics of the spirit and how we maintain spiritual health with focusing on being healthy energetically.
Yeah. I mean, I think ceremony too is helpful for energetic healing.
Yeah.
sanctuary is helpful for the energetic health.
And I think it's really important to mention too, like what you were saying as far as the energetics and everything else being all interwoven together, and really that being your spiritual health and well-being, as far as at least the way I'm framing it, in just looking at my own spiritual health as being something that has different aspects to the one thing, and the different aspects, being the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the energetics of my spirit. I
So,
also think there's sorry, go
oh
ahead.
no, go on. I
What were
don't.
you gonna say?
It's okay. No, go on.
I was gonna say, I also think there's another important aspect of it, and I'm not sure if it's a category in and of itself, but it's the community aspect of it. It's the people you're around, and um, obviously sometimes you got to be around people that you don't really want to be around, or maybe even choose to be around. And then there are people which you choose to be around and want to be around. And I mean, all of that's community. And
Maybe you call
with
it
the
social health.
social health, I like that. Social health. I'm gonna write that down. And I really think that social health um, is about your inner relationship with yourself, and then how you express to other people, being your inter relationships. INTER, not the same thing. I don't know if I say they kind of sound the same. But I was watching this documentary. It was the Blue Zones. I mentioned that to you, and I think you said you watched it.
Hmm.
Um, but the one consistent thing that was reported for longevity is to really have, some close friends around you, and to have people that you're close to, not just friends, but like family members, friends,
Yeah,
community members,
neighbors.
yeah, neighbors. You could also be
Yeah.
friends.
Well, I mean, we don't exist as a separate thing. So it makes sense that part of the quality of your relationships affects affects all of these things. Your emotional health, your energetic health. I mean, even your physical health. Like you're saying, right from the blue zones. I remember that as being one of the things they notice in some of the areas that helps people to live to over 100 or even just live to an older age. Right? They weren't just looking at people that were how do you call it?
Centurions, I think.
Centurion.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that really interesting, how, it's not just like physical health, although it all ties together. I mean, there's many aspects, but I just found it interesting how, they found that community plays a very significant role in the longevity of people.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to reconsider adding that to my definition of health.
I like the way you framed it with social health. It's a good concept to be
Yeah.
able to grasp it then and work with it.
Yeah, I do like that. I do like that.
Yeah, I mean, I even look at it as like, you know, our relationship as friends, and my friendship with Lou, your husband, and then the whole Blue Morpho community, and then my family, my other friends, and then how I relate to people at work, and then my inner relationship of just working on being as kind as I can to them, even though like I'm still a human being and like sometimes I show up and I'm grumpy. Sorry. I don't want to project it out, and I give it my best not to project it out. And I think that's where the health is just the willingness to, work on it, work on showing up in compassion and kindness, as you were saying, non-judgment.
I think having boundaries, I think being honest, I think being like reciprocal or giving is helpful too.
Boundaries are important with maintaining your own health and well-being.
Yeah, and the health of your relationships, setting a boundary rather than resenting what someone's doing or getting mad at them when you haven't even said, this isn't okay for me. I think that's a really healthy and mature way to frame a space and to protect your
Very,
own well-being.
it's very spiritually mature.
Yes.
No, I mean it. It is. It really is. I think that's very spiritually mature. Saying, like telling someone if they don't know that they crossed the boundary, that they crossed the boundary, and not, like you said, getting upset at them, but just letting them know.
Yeah, or taking a no too from somebody, or like asking a friend for something and they say no, they can't do it, like being able to honor that and respect that. Or if you've crossed a friend's boundary, I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of dealing with the emotions that go along with that.
and learning from it, and not to, cross that boundary again, and respect the way that person likes to be interacted with.
Yeah, yeah. I think too there's that under like that idea of rupture and repair that you get with relationships, knowing that you could have a fight with a friend and it doesn't have to be that the relationship is over, that there's an opportunity to mend and to repair and to fix it and to develop a new understanding or a
And
new
to
way
create
of
stronger,
relating.
yeah, create a new way of relating, and you know also do create stronger bonds.
Yeah, that's part of it. But some people don't learn that from childhood that it's okay, right? Like conflict becomes something that is kind of avoided, or it wasn't comfortable for you to tell your truth to somebody, so you don't. Or someone, told you and you got rejected and you didn't learn how to handle that rejection. It could be hard for people, I think, to be honest. I mean, sometimes too people don't even know what they're thinking or feeling or what a boundary actually is, right? There's also like people pleasing and all that kind of stuff. That really affects our relationality with people.
And also being accepting that, it's totally okay to have different ideas about something, and to not have to even be in conflict with that at all.
Yeah, like it's okay to disagree, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I've ever met anyone that there wasn't something I disagreed with them about.
Yeah, I think that's just normal. How would we all agree? Right, but just being able to handle like the normal everyday things that come along with having interactions with people. Yeah, let's move on because we didn't talk about spiritual health at all,
Okay,
like the
let's talk
actual
about
like
that.
spirituality. So before we close out, because I think there's also specific things that or practices that focus like on spirituality.
Absolutely. So what would you say it means And what do you do for spiritual health?
I mean, we're talking now about how everything is really spiritual. And we've talked about before how, I forgot what I was just going to say. I oftentimes orient my spirituality, well, to God and to other unseen or disembodied spirits. I think of it as developing like the qualities of God and embodying those and interaction with spirit or spirits to help me, I guess, be the best that I could be. I do a lot of praying recently, and I do that centering prayer that's like a meditation. And I do my candle lighting, and I connect with the spirits that I'm working with daily, invoking them. And I think really just trying to live like, with compassion for people, with kindness, with grace, with patience, finding joy, like finding acceptance, or even your worthiness, I think, is partly, like understanding that, I mean, this is my understanding that like God is just a loving God and loves you no matter what, and that you don't have to, it's not going to be the job or the car or the next thing that makes you worthy of that. I think focusing on that for me too is a practice. My spiritual social relationships.
I really like what you said about embodying the qualities of God with, God being the word I'm looking for. Is it omniscient?
Omnipotent,
No,
omniscient,
no.
all knowing, I think is omniscient.
Yeah, it's like a word that just like an all-knowing and benevolent being. Not saying that I could be all-knowing, but benevolent certainly. And
Yeah, I don't
work
take
on
the all knowing part. I don't really focus
yeah.
on that one.
No, it's just like knowing that like there's things that I can know and like there's also like all these unknowns too. But yeah, just like having that benevolency, I think is so important to spiritual health because when you have that benevolency and you really embody that quality, that power of benevolency, well, and you apply that to your spiritual health and well-being, you're benevolent to your mentality, you're benevolent to your physicality, you're benevolent to your emotional and your energetics, and you're benevolent to your social health and the way that you interact with people. And so it's just, I see it as all encompassing. And those are the virtues that I want to embody. Just be be a benevolent human being, not cause harm in the world, and help where I can help, and be kind to myself and others. I really think that's really where the health is.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I don't think we covered it all, but I think that was a very good start. It's a very in-depth topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other people have to say on all that.
Yeah, same here. I would like to know what it means for other people to be spiritually healthy. So, did we cover it all?
I don't know, like you said, probably not, but
Did we cover as much as we could cover today?
yeah, I think so.
I think so too. Yeah. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast and you would like to comment about what it means for you to be spiritually healthy, please comment or reach out to us and tell us what it means for you to be spiritually healthy. And if you vibe up with what we're talking about, if you give us a like button, a subscribe button, that would always be nice. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to, you know, discuss this with you, Melissa, and this very, very in-depth topic and sometimes maybe not always clear of spiritual health, but I really think that this conversation has helped me to be clear about what spiritual health means to me.
Hmm, I agree. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Adios.